Humanity did not enter the galaxy with a roar. It entered quietly. No empire bowed. No ancient throne trembled. No alien prophet carved warnings into sacred stone. At first, Earth was only a blue speck on the outer rim of known space, a primitive world orbiting an ordinary star, watched by distant observers with mild curiosity and even milder concern. To the great powers of the galaxy, humans were latecomers. Young. Fragile. Divided. They had spent most of their existence trapped beneath their own sky, fighting over borders, beliefs, resources, pride, and fear. They had poisoned their rivers, scarred their continents, and nearly destroyed themselves more than once before learning how small they truly were. So when humanity finally looked beyond its moon and stepped into the wider dark, the galaxy did not welcome them as equals. It tolerated them. The ruling coalition, an alliance of ancient species that had governed interstellar law for centuries, recorded Earth as a developing civilization. A curious one, perhaps. Ambitious. Clever. Occasionally reckless. But not dangerous. Not yet. That was the first mistake. The coalition had existed for so long that most of its member species had forgotten what uncertainty felt like. Their borders had held for centuries. Their fleets patrolled the trade lanes. Their courts settled disputes between worlds. Their doctrine shaped every military academy from the bright core systems to the dim colonial belts. They believed peace existed because they preserved it. They believed order survived because they commanded it. And above all, they believed no young species could rise quickly enough to challenge them before they were properly restrained, regulated, and absorbed into the machinery of galactic politics. Then humanity proved them wrong. Within a single generation of achieving true faster-than-light travel, Earth did what most species required 1,000 years to accomplish. Human ships spread beyond their solar cradle. Human engineers learned from every technology they encountered, then rebuilt it stronger, cheaper, faster, and stranger. Human diplomats studied ancient alien customs with unnerving patience. Human merchants entered trade networks that had once ignored them and somehow made themselves indispensable. And human soldiers watched everything. They studied fleet movements, supply doctrine, defensive patterns, communications discipline, command delays, cultural blind spots. The ancient powers saw military parades. Humanity saw habits. The coalition noticed too late. By the time they began to understand what Earth was becoming, humanity had already built mining colonies in resource-rich systems near contested space. They had fortified moons once considered too barren to matter. They had negotiated mutual defense agreements with smaller species that had spent centuries living under coalition pressure. They had created shipyards hidden in asteroid shadows, research labs beneath frozen oceans, and listening posts beyond the reach of official star charts. The galaxy whispered. Some called humanity bold. Some called them opportunistic. Some called them dangerous. The coalition called them a problem. For centuries, the galactic order had rested on a fragile balance. Ancient rivals cooperated only because open war would cost too much. Border disputes were contained before they became crusades. Small civilizations survived because the great powers found it convenient to let them survive. Peace was not kindness. It was calculation. Humanity disturbed that calculation. Earth did not behave like the coalition expected. Humans questioned old agreements. They challenged unfair tariffs. They defended weak allies with surprising conviction. They refused to submit to inspections that other young species accepted without protest. They built fleets faster than the coalition could classify them. They adapted to alien technology as if they had been born to steal fire from gods. And worse, they inspired others. Worlds that had once obeyed quietly began asking why Earth was allowed to refuse. Species that had bent their knees for generations began watching human broadcasts in secret. Colonies that had been treated as bargaining chips began to wonder whether the galaxy's oldest powers were not eternal after all. That was when fear replaced irritation. The coalition assembled in the Hall of Convergence, a station older than human civilization, suspended above the storm bands of a gas giant in neutral space. Representatives from 27 dominant species gathered beneath a ceiling of living crystal, each carrying the weight of empires. They did not speak of peace. They spoke of containment. Humanity had expanded into the Vaden Reach, a cluster of mineral-dense systems long claimed by coalition members but never properly settled. Earth argued that unused claims were not ownership. The coalition argued that human expansion threatened regional stability. Both sides understood the truth. The Vaden Reach was not the cause of the coming war. It was the excuse. The ultimatum was transmitted across all official channels, translated into every recognized diplomatic language, and delivered directly to Earth Command. Humanity was ordered to withdraw from all disputed systems within 30 standard days. Earth was ordered to submit its military expansion to coalition supervision. Humanity was ordered to accept advisory governors on all outer colonies. And Earth was warned that refusal would be considered an act of aggression against the galactic order itself. For 9 days, humanity said nothing. The silence unsettled the coalition more than any protest could have. On the 10th day, Earth answered. The message was not delivered by a politician. It came from Admiral Elias Varr, commander of the United Earth Defense Fleet, standing aboard the command deck of the dreadnought Resolute Dawn. Behind him, officers moved with controlled urgency. Beyond the viewport, Earth hung in darkness, blue and white and alive. His voice was calm. Not angry. Not afraid. Calm. For years, humanity sought friendship. We signed your treaties. We attended your councils. We listened when you warned us to be patient. We listened when you told us our place. We listened when you called our caution weakness and our ambition a threat. But understand this now. Earth does not belong to the coalition. Our colonies do not belong to the coalition. Our future does not belong to the coalition. He paused, and across 10,000 worlds, entire populations held their breath. If you choose peace, we will meet you with open hands. His eyes hardened. If you choose war, let us show you how it is done. The transmission ended. And the galaxy changed forever. For some, the message confirmed every fear. Humanity was arrogant, volatile, and too dangerous to be allowed to grow. For others, it was the first honest sound they had heard from a rising power in centuries. Not begging. Not submitting. Not pleading for permission to exist. The coalition answered with fleets. They did not send a warning force. They did not send negotiators. They sent armadas large enough to darken stars. Warships from 12 major species gathered near the border of human-controlled space, their hulls decorated with symbols that had once ended rebellions before the first shot was fired. The coalition believed numbers would decide the war. They believed history would decide the war. They believed humanity, young and surrounded, would break beneath the pressure of ancient power. The first invasion fleet crossed into the Vaden Reach under the command of High Marshal Threx of the Orati Dominion, a veteran of border wars fought before humans had built their first permanent settlements on Mars. His flagship, the Crown of Silence, was a monstrous vessel surrounded by layered shields and escort formations so precise they looked ceremonial. Threx did not expect resistance to last. He expected panic. Instead, he found empty space. No human fleet waited at the border. The mining stations appeared abandoned. Orbital docks were cold. Communication buoys repeated evacuation notices in 6 languages. His officers laughed. They thought humanity had fled. Then the stars around them began to move. Small human strike ships emerged from asteroid shadows, engine signatures masked by mineral interference. Drone swarms detached from dead satellites. Mines, silent for weeks, awakened beneath the coalition formation. Electronic warfare pulses struck command frequencies with surgical precision. Before Threx could issue a complete order, 3 escort cruisers lost navigation control and drifted into their own shield arcs. The first battle lasted 14 minutes. The Coalition won the space. Humanity won the lesson. Threx captured the outer belt, but at a price no one had predicted. His fleet lost more support ships than it had in the previous 40 years of military operations. His supply maps were corrupted. His communications officers could no longer trust automated relay data. His scouts reported ghost signals in every direction. Humans had not defended the border. They had turned the border into a weapon. The Coalition dismissed it as clever resistance. Then it happened again. And again. At Cauldron Station, a Coalition refueling depot exploded without a single human vessel detected nearby. Investigators discovered that human engineers had infiltrated the fuel processing software months before the war began, hiding a dormant instruction inside routine pressure maintenance code. At the moon of Seraph, Coalition ground troops landed to seize a human research facility. They found the facility stripped bare, its corridors filled with decoy heat signatures, false life signs, and walls that collapsed into defensive choke points. Human Marines, outnumbered 11-1, held the moon for 36 hours and evacuated with 90% of their personnel. At the Yarrow Gate, a Coalition battle group pursued what appeared to be a damaged human cruiser. The cruiser limped through a debris field, bleeding atmosphere and broadcasting distress. When the Coalition closed in, the cruiser separated into 6 autonomous weapons platforms, while hidden rail batteries fired from the wreckage of a mining platform that had been listed as destroyed 3 years earlier. The Coalition kept winning territory. Humanity kept making every victory hurt. That was the second mistake the Coalition made. They believed war was measured in maps. Humans measured it in cost. On Earth, the war transformed everything. Factories that once produced civilian transports began building patrol craft. Universities redirected research toward shield harmonics, propulsion efficiency, battlefield medicine, and artificial intelligence-assisted logistics. Retired engineers returned to shipyards. Farmers donated harvest surpluses to military ration programs. Musicians played in underground shelters during blackout drills. Children learned the names of distant colonies they had never seen and sent recorded messages to soldiers defending them. Humanity had always been divided by language, culture, history, and ideology. The Coalition gave them something older than division. A shared enemy. For the first time in centuries, Earth looked outward with one voice. Not because humans had become peaceful by nature. Not because old rivalries vanished. But because every human understood what submission would mean. They had seen the terms offered to weaker civilizations. They had heard stories from refugee species who had once trusted Coalition supervision. Advisory governors became permanent administrators. Military limitations became political obedience. Trade oversight became economic dependence. Cultural protection became cultural control. Humanity had not survived its own violent history just to become someone else's obedient province. So Earth endured. The war was not easy. The first months were brutal. Colonies burned. Convoys vanished. Entire families waited for messages that never came. The Coalition's heavy ships could crack orbital defenses with terrifying power. Their soldiers were disciplined. Their weapons were old, refined, and deadly. Their experience was real. Humanity bled. But it learned while bleeding. Every destroyed human ship transmitted combat data until its final second. Every retreat left sensors behind. Every lost battlefield became a classroom. Human analysts reconstructed Coalition tactics in staggering detail. They identified which species preferred rigid formations, which commanders overprotected flagships, which fleets depended too heavily on centralized control, which supply chains contained single points of failure, and which communication protocols could be delayed by fractions of a second at decisive moments. The coalition fought from doctrine. Humanity fought from feedback. Within 6 months, human fleet tactics changed so rapidly that coalition intelligence departments could not keep their reports current. A defensive pattern that worked in one battle failed in the next. Shield frequencies that resisted human missiles 1 week were useless the following week. Boarding strategies developed against human frigates became fatal when those frigates were redesigned with internal kill corridors and modular bulkheads. Coalition commanders complained that humans did not fight honorably. Human commanders replied that survival had no ceremonial form. The coalition believed in decisive battle. Massive fleets. Formal advances. Command hierarchy. Strategic intimidation. The weight of tradition. Humanity believed in breaking the enemy's ability to continue. They struck shipyards, not monuments. Relay stations, not capitals. Fuel depots, not palaces. They targeted repair capacity, ammunition reserves, transport routes, sensor grids, logistics officers, and morale broadcasts. They did not need to destroy every coalition fleet. They only needed to make those fleets hungry, blind, late, and afraid. For ancient empires accustomed to obedience, this was infuriating. For soldiers trapped inside those empires, it was terrifying. A coalition destroyer captain could wake to find his navigation database replaced by human poetry translated into his own language. A supply convoy might receive flawless orders from command, only to discover too late that the orders had been rerouted through a captured relay. Ground troops on occupied moons heard human music broadcast through their helmet channels at low volume, always just loud enough to remind them that the enemy was near. Humanity invaded the mind before it invaded the battlefield. Rumors spread through coalition ranks. Humans could hide ships inside comets. Humans could predict your orders before you received them. Humans could turn your machines against you. Humans did not know when they were beaten. The last rumor was the truest. On the colony world of Havenfall, the coalition achieved what should have been a crushing victory. Havenfall was a garden planet, one of humanity's earliest extrasolar settlements, home to 8 million civilians and 3 orbital defense rings. The coalition sent 4 fleets to take it. Their bombardment shattered 2 defense rings in the first day. Their troops landed near the capital on the second. By the 4th day, every major city was under siege. Coalition command expected surrender. Instead, Havenfall disappeared. Not physically. The planet remained. Its cities remained. Its people remained. But every system the coalition depended on to control it failed at once. Power grids rerouted themselves. Transit tunnels sealed behind advancing troops. Civilian data networks became encrypted resistance channels. Weather satellites altered storm prediction feeds. Cargo drones rammed armored columns. Agricultural machines became barricades. Construction rigs became artillery platforms. Medical robots evacuated wounded through maintenance passages the invaders did not know existed. The civilian population did not wait to be rescued. It became part of the defense. Teachers coordinated shelter networks. Taxi pilots moved ammunition under the cover of refugee evacuations. Children carried sensor tags through drainage systems because they were small enough to fit where soldiers could not. Elderly technicians reopened communication lines buried beneath the oldest districts. Local historians guided militia units through forgotten infrastructure plans. Havenfall held for 19 days. On the 20th, Admiral Var arrived. The resolute Dawn emerged from faster than light with a fleet that should not have been there. Var's fleet struck the coalition siege line from behind. The battle above Havenfall became legend. Human ships did not fly in elegant formation. They moved like predators. Cruisers broke apart into independent attack groups. Corvettes slipped between capital ships and fired into exposed shield seams. Drone clouds created false targets so convincing that coalition batteries wasted entire volleys on empty space. Human carriers launched strike craft in waves timed not by ceremony, but by enemy reaction delay. The coalition flagship, the Orati vessel Hammer of Judgment, turned to engage the resolute Dawn directly. It never got the chance. 3 human frigates accelerated toward it at suicidal velocity. Coalition gunners focused on them, certain no crew would dare continue that approach. They were right. There were no crews aboard. The frigates were remote vessels filled with shield disruptors and kinetic cores. They slammed into the Hammer of Judgment's defensive envelope and tore open a window in its layered protection. The resolute Dawn fired once. A spear of white light crossed the battlefield and pierced the flagship from bow to stern. The Hammer of Judgment broke in silence. Across Haven Fall, civilians looked up and saw pieces of the invader burning across their sky. The coalition retreated from the planet 2 days later. They had taken cities, lost fleets, and learned nothing they could admit publicly. The official report called Haven Fall a temporary strategic reversal. The soldiers who survived called it a warning. After Haven Fall, the war changed. Small species began reconsidering old loyalties. Neutral systems quietly opened ports to human ships. Intelligence networks that had once served the coalition began selling information to Earth. Resistance movements on occupied worlds adopted human tactics, not because humans ordered them to, but because humans had shown that the ancient powers could be hurt. The coalition tried to restore confidence through spectacle. They gathered the largest fleet assembled in 5 centuries at the Esterian Corridor, a strategic passage linking the inner territories to the frontier war zones. If the coalition held Esterian, they could flood contested space with reinforcements and crush human resistance through sheer mass. If humanity broke it, the coalition's forward forces would be isolated. Every strategist in the galaxy understood what was coming. The coalition wanted a grand battle. Humanity gave them one. For 3 days, the Esterian corridor burned. The coalition arrived in perfect formation, thousands of ships arranged according to doctrines older than some stars' recorded histories. Their capital vessels advanced at the center. Their cruisers guarded the flanks. Their carriers released disciplined waves of fighters. Their commanders transmitted declarations of authority across open channels. Humanity listened. Then it answered with silence. The human fleet did not appear. For 6 hours, coalition ships advanced through the corridor without opposition. Their sensors detected nothing but dust, radiation, and the faint remains of long-dead comets. Then the corridor itself turned against them. Humanity had spent months preparing Esterian. Not with a defensive line, but with an environment of traps. Asteroids had been hollowed and fitted with engines. Dust clouds had been seeded with reflective particles that confused targeting systems. Gravity buoys altered micro-trajectories just enough to ruin precision formation flying. Hidden stations projected false fleet signatures in impossible locations. The coalition formation began to stretch. Then fracture. Then panic. Human ships emerged only after the enemy's perfect order became a prison. They struck from above the galactic plane, from beneath sensor shadows, from behind rocks that had been drifting harmlessly for centuries. Their weapons were not always stronger, but they arrived where shields were weakest. Their movements were not always faster, but they forced coalition ships to turn in the wrong direction at the wrong time. High Marshal Threx, still commanding after his early failures, realized too late that humanity had not come to meet his fleet. It had come to dismantle his doctrine in front of the entire galaxy. By the second day, the coalition lost control of the corridor's central lane. By the third, their rear supply line collapsed. At the height of the battle, a human task force led by Captain Mara Solon executed what later became known as the Lantern Cut. Her ships appeared to retreat under heavy fire, drawing 3 coalition carrier groups into pursuit. Once the carriers committed, human stealth vessels ignited thousands of dormant navigation beacons in a spherical pattern around them. The beacons overloaded local sensor space with false friendly signatures. Coalition carriers, unable to distinguish enemy from ally, halted launch operations for 7 critical minutes. 7 minutes was enough. Solon's destroyers turned and fired into the carrier's exposed launch bays. The explosions lit the corridor like a string of suns. When the coalition finally withdrew from Asterion, they did not call it a reversal. They called it a disaster. The coalition had lost more than ships. It had lost certainty. And certainty had been the foundation of its power. Inside the Hall of Convergence, unity began to crack. The Kalari accused the Orati of arrogance. The Voruan blamed intelligence failures. The Shale demanded negotiations. The Dravik insisted that mercy would invite rebellion. Smaller member states, dragged into a war they had not wanted, began withholding ships. Public confidence collapsed across worlds where the coalition had promised swift victory. The question spread through their populations like disease. If humanity could do this, what else had the coalition been wrong about? Meanwhile, humanity paid for every triumph. Earth's economy groaned under the burden of total war. Orbital shipyards operated without pause. Medical centers overflowed with wounded soldiers and civilians from frontier colonies. Families gathered around casualty lists posted in city squares and on public networks. Entire neighborhoods dimmed their lights at night to conserve energy for defense grids. Food distribution became stricter. Travel became limited. Personal comforts disappeared one by one. No human victory came clean. Every name etched into memorial walls became part of the price. Yet the hardship did not break humanity. It hardened them. On Mars, workers lived beside assembly lines so ship components never stopped moving. On Luna, children collected scrap metals for drone casings. In the Pacific Arcology, thousands volunteered for civil defense after a coalition raid struck orbital elevators. Across the African Union, engineers restored damaged launch infrastructure in record time. In the Amazon recovery zones, bio-labs produced emergency medicines for wounded soldiers from 3 different species fighting alongside humans. Humanity was not united because it had become perfect. It was united because the alternative was surrender. And surrender had become impossible. As the war dragged into its second year, Earth's alliances deepened. The coalition's enemies were not all noble. Some were opportunists. Some simply wanted revenge. But many were smaller civilizations that had lived for generations beneath the shadow of coalition authority. The Lumine, a delicate aquatic species from ocean worlds, provided stealth coolant systems that allowed human ships to hide longer near stars. The Karati, once forbidden from building warships above patrol class, offered pilots trained in dense asteroid belts. The MYN collective shared mathematical models that improved human jump accuracy. The Vaden clans, whose ancestral territories had been treated as resources by coalition maps, opened secret routes through nebula fields. The coalition called these alliances illegal. Humanity called them friendships. That difference mattered. Because the coalition demanded obedience. Humanity asked for help. Not every human commander understood this at first. Some saw allies only as strategic assets. Admiral Var corrected that thinking with ruthless clarity. In one recorded briefing, after an officer referred to Allied ships as expendable auxiliaries, Var dismissed him in front of the entire command staff. "We are not building a smaller version of the coalition," he said. "We win with them, or we become what we are fighting." The word spread through Allied fleets. Trust did not come easily, but it came. And with trust came a new kind of war. Mixed fleets began operating across contested space. Human adaptability combined with alien specialization. Lumine stealth ships got on the command deck of the Resolute Dawn. Admiral Var watched the tactical display fill with enemy signatures. Someone asked if he wanted to address the fleet. Var looked at the faces around him. Humans. Lumine. Myn. Karati. Vaden. Others too, species that would once never have stood together in the same room, now bound by the same impossible choice. He opened the channel. To every ship in this line, this is Admiral Var. The enemy believes they are coming for Earth. They are wrong. Earth is not a planet behind us. Earth is every hand that refuses a chain. Earth is every voice that says no when power demands silence. Earth is every world represented here, every family waiting, every grave we carry, every future they think they can own. He breathed once. They wanted to know what humanity would become under pressure. His voice lowered. Let us answer. The Dravik arrived like a storm of iron. The first exchange of fire turned the darkness white. Dravik assault ships drove straight into the human allied line, absorbing punishment that would have shattered lesser fleets. Their weapons punched through shields and tore open hulls. Human ships scattered, regrouped, and struck at the flanks. Lumine stealth craft blinded targeting arrays. Karate pilots swarmed engine clusters. MYN vessels fed predictive data through battle channels so fast that human gunners fired at openings before they fully appeared. For every Dravik ship destroyed, 2 more advanced. They were not elegant. They were not subtle. They were terrifying. The Horizon Flame took a direct hit across its launch decks and kept fighting while burning atmosphere into space. The Vaden scout ship Nara's Promise rammed a Dravik cruiser after losing engines, opening a gap that saved an entire medical convoy. The Lumine vessel's soft current flooded its own compartments with radiation coolant to mask the retreat of damaged human destroyers, sacrificing half its crew. The Allied line bent. It did not break. Koran, commanding from the Dravik flagship Iron Verdict, recognized Var's strategy. Humanity was trying to slow him, bleed him, and force him to commit reserves before the final approach to Sol. It was clever. Brave. Predictable. So Koran changed course. He ordered his central spear to ignore the Allied flanks and drive directly toward the jump threshold. If even one major Dravik force broke through, Earth would burn. Var saw it happen. The center was collapsing. He ordered the Resolute Dawn forward. His officers stared at him. The flagship was not meant to act as bait. Var gave the order again. The Resolute Dawn surged into the breach, broadcasting maximum power, daring the Dravik to take the prize. Koran accepted. The Iron Verdict and its escort group turned toward Var with every forward cannon charging. Across the battlefield, human and allied captains understood. Their admiral was making himself the center of the storm. The Resolute Dawn took the first volley and lost its outer shield layer. The second volley tore through armor near the port batteries. The third ruptured 3 decks. Still, it advanced. Var ordered all remaining power diverted to the forward spinal lance. Engineers warned that firing at that output could destroy the ship's core. Var told them to prepare evacuation routes, then cancelled his own. The Iron Verdict closed in. Koran opened a channel. His face appeared on Var's display, scarred, cold, and triumphant. You fight well for a species born yesterday. Var, blood running from a cut above one eye, looked back at him. And you die poorly for an empire that had centuries to practice. The channel closed. The Resolute Dawn fired. The spinal lance struck the Iron Verdict, but the Dravik flagship's armor held just enough. The beam carved a molten wound across its bow, yet failed to destroy it. Koran's ship returned fire. The Resolute Dawn's engines died. Its shields collapsed. For one terrible moment, the human flagship drifted helpless before the enemy. Koran ordered the final shot. It never fired. Because humanity had not brought the Resolute Dawn forward to win a duel. It had brought the Dravik flagship into position. Beneath the shattered planetary remains of Aureas, hidden inside fragments of dead worlds, thousands of human-built gravity anchors activated at once. They had been placed weeks earlier by Vaden scouts and human drones, disguised as mineral deposits and debris. The anchors did not create a weapon blast. They created a gravitational cage. The Iron Verdict and its escort group were trapped. MYN calculation vessels transmitted firing solutions. Every Allied ship in range turned its guns. The Dravik flagship vanished beneath concentrated fire from 9 species. When the Iron Verdict broke apart, the Dravik fleet did something no one expected. It hesitated. Only for seconds. But seconds were enough. Human reserves emerged from behind the White Star, where solar radiation had hidden their approach. Not a large fleet. Not enough to defeat the Dravik alone. But enough to strike a force whose command had just been ripped out of its chest. The Dravik advance collapsed into confusion. Some ships continued forward. Others turned to protect damaged carriers. Others searched for orders that would never come. Human and Allied forces surged into the fractures. By the end of the Battle of Aureus, the invasion of Sol was dead. The coalition's last great offensive had failed. The cost was unbearable. The resolute Dawn survived, barely. Admiral Var was pulled from the wreckage of his command deck with broken ribs, a burned hand, and a refusal to leave until every trapped officer had been evacuated. The Horizon Flame was abandoned after saving more than 20,000 pilots. The Lumine mourned 3 vessels. The Karati lost an entire attack wing. The Vaden clans carved the names of their dead into navigation stones and sent copies to Earth. But Sol lived. Earth lived. And every world watching understood that the coalition could no longer win by force. The war did not end that day. Wars never end as cleanly as stories wish. There were still sieges. Still raids. Still bitter commanders who refused recall. Still ruined colonies and grieving families. Still prisoners to exchange and borders to redraw. Still worlds that feared what humanity might become after victory. But after Aureus, the coalition began to negotiate. Not command. Negotiate. The first peace conference took place not in the Hall of Convergence, but aboard a neutral station built around an old trade hub near the Vaden Reach. Humanity refused to enter the ancient hall where the ultimatum had been written. Smaller species supported them. The coalition objected, then relented. That alone told the galaxy everything. The negotiations lasted 7 months. The coalition demanded human disarmament. Humanity refused. The coalition demanded withdrawal from disputed territories. Humanity offered shared development under local consent. The coalition demanded punishment for human attacks on infrastructure. Humanity presented evidence of civilian bombardments, illegal occupations, and medical strikes. The coalition demanded recognition of its authority. Humanity asked who had granted it. The room went silent. That question had not been asked seriously in centuries. When the final treaty was signed, it did not make humanity ruler of the galaxy. Earth did not claim the coalition's throne. Admiral Var, now a symbol larger than any office he held, rejected calls from some human factions to dismantle the coalition entirely. Power hates a vacuum, he said. And humanity is not immune to arrogance. Instead, the Treaty of Vaden created something new. An expanded galactic council where smaller civilizations held protected votes. A ban on forced advisory governance. Independent courts for interstellar disputes. Shared resource rights in contested systems. Restrictions on military action against developing species. And, most controversially, full recognition of humanity and its allies as sovereign powers beyond coalition supervision. The old order survived. But it no longer ruled alone. Across Earth, the treaty was celebrated in streets still marked by ration lines and memorial banners. Bells rang in cities. Ships sounded horns in orbital docks. Families gathered beneath open skies and watched names scroll across public screens, not only of the living heroes, but of the dead who had paid for the day. No one pretended peace erased the cost. Havenfall still rebuilt its shattered towers. Forge 7 still buried workers recovered from sealed tunnels. Mars still carried scars from raids that had nearly reached its shipyards. The asteroid colonies still counted those lost in convoy ambushes. And on Luna, the first great memorial of the war was carved into the inner wall of Shackleton crater. It bore no statue of conquest. No figure holding a sword. No alien crushed beneath a human boot. Only words. We stood because we had to. Years passed. The galaxy adjusted to a reality it had once considered impossible. Humanity became neither savior nor monster, though many tried to paint them as one or the other. Humans argued among themselves, made mistakes, overreached, apologized, repaired, and argued again. Their allies did the same. Peace remained difficult because peace had always been difficult. But something fundamental had changed. When old powers entered negotiations, they looked across the table differently. When a small world protested unfair treatment, its voice carried farther. When a fleet crossed a border, it did so knowing that somewhere, human analysts might already be watching. The legend of the war grew, as legends always do. Children on distant worlds learned about Havenfall's 19 days. Pilots studied the lantern cut. Engineers spoke of Forge 7 as proof that tools could become shields in desperate hands. Strategists examined Aureus for generations, trying to understand how a younger civilization had defeated powers with centuries of experience. Some said humanity won because of technology. They were wrong. Some said humanity won because of aggression. They were also wrong. Humanity won because it adapted faster than fear could contain it. It learned from pain without surrendering to it. It turned civilians into builders, builders into defenders, defenders into symbols, and symbols into alliances. It understood that war was not only a contest of weapons, but of will, imagination, memory, and moral endurance. The coalition had expected a young species to panic. Instead, humanity organized. The coalition had expected Earth to fight alone. Instead, humanity listened to the forgotten and stood beside them. The coalition had expected victory to come from power. Instead, humanity taught the galaxy that power without flexibility becomes brittle, and tradition without conscience becomes tyranny. Admiral Elias Varr lived long enough to see the 10th anniversary of the Treaty of Vaden. By then, he no longer commanded fleets. He walked with a cane, his left hand never fully healed from Aureus. He refused most ceremonies, disliked statues, and corrected anyone who called him the man who saved Earth. I was one officer, he would say. Earth was saved by everyone who refused to let it fall. On the anniversary, he returned to Havenfall. The capital had been rebuilt, though not as it had been before. The people left sections of ruined walls standing between new towers, not from lack of resources, but by choice. Flowers grew around broken armor plates. Children played in plazas where evacuation sirens had once screamed. Above the city, the restored defense ring glittered in sunlight. Varr stood before a crowd that included humans and aliens from dozens of worlds. Survivors of the siege. Families of the dead. Former coalition soldiers who had since testified against their commanders. Young officers who had been children when the war began. He had prepared no grand speech. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he looked up at the sky. When they came here, he said, they believed fear would make you kneel. They believed suffering would make you obedient. They believed a young people could not carry the weight of history. He turned back to the crowd. They were wrong because they did not understand what history is. It is not age. It is not monuments. It is not how long a throne has stood or how many flags have flown over conquered ground. History is what people choose when the cost is real. His voice softened. You chose to stand. No one cheered at first. Many cried. Then, slowly, the crowd raised lights. Human lanterns. Lumine glow vessels. Karate fire beads. Vaden star stones. MYN crystal prisms. Thousands of small lights lifted beneath Havenfall's sky until the plaza looked like a piece of the galaxy brought close enough to touch. Var watched them in silence. And perhaps, for the first time since the war began, he allowed himself to believe that survival could become something greater than victory. Far away, in the restored Hall of Convergence, a new generation of delegates studied the old recordings of humanity's first defiant message. The one the coalition had once mocked. The one its leaders had dismissed as arrogance from a species too young to understand consequences. Now it was required viewing for every diplomat entering service. Not because humanity was always right. Not because Earth was beyond criticism. But because the message marked the moment the galaxy remembered that peace without respect is only a quieter form of domination. The final line became known everywhere. Children repeated it on playgrounds. Soldiers carved it inside helmets. Politicians quoted it carefully, often without understanding its weight. But those who had lived through the war knew what it truly meant. It was not a hunger for violence. It was not a boast. It was a warning from a species that had spent its entire history learning the terrible shape of conflict, a species that had known civil war, invasion, resistance, revolution, ruin, rebuilding, grief, and hope. Humanity had looked at the galaxy's ancient powers and recognized something familiar. Bullies wearing the language of order. Empires calling control peace. Fear disguised as wisdom. So when the coalition chose war, humanity did not discover what it was. Humanity remembered. And the galaxy, vast and old and certain of itself, learned a lesson written in fire across the stars. Never mistake youth for weakness. Never mistake patience for surrender. Never mistake peace for permission. Because when humanity finally stopped asking to be accepted, when Earth stood alone beneath the shadow of impossible fleets, when every ancient power expected the blue world to bow, humanity answered with the only truth left. If you choose war, let us show you how it is done.